Train 141, branching off onto the Rotorua branch and past the site of the former Huntly West station, and crossing over what was once State Highway 1 through Huntly. Coal from the Rotorua open cast mine is destined for the steel mill at Mission Bush. M52 that runs to and from Waitoa now has 2 DCs back to back. KiwiRail now has a policy of no mainline movements with locomotives long hood leading. The Murupara line was opened in 1957 to tap into the large pine forests of the Kaingaroa Plateau. Up until 1924, the village of National Park was known as Waimarino. It was changed because it caused confusion with mail deliveries and address searches in the area. To the right in the background was the location of Waikuni Minimum Security Prison that opened in the 1920s. It closed in 1986 due to a lack of funding for much needed repairs, and today nothing remains on the site. A drone view of Harapito Motors, an enormous vehicle graveyard that is known worldwide for sourcing specialist parts for vehicle restoration projects. It was also used as a location for films such as Goodbye Pork Pie and Smash Palace. Crossing Makatuku River, with the start of the Old Coach Road mountain bike trail on the right. The Palmerston North to Napier Railway passes through the water feature and beside the clock tower in Hastings. Crossing the Manawatu Viaduct that on Tuesday the 1st of March 1966 saw a flash flood take out the original tall steel tower supporting the centre span. Train 535 passes the Waipipi wind farm north of Waverley that consists of 31 wind turbines that are the largest wind turbines presently operating in New Zealand. Double-headed Ks on the Westmere Bank during the last couple of years of steam operation. Passing the deserted station and goods shed at Waverley, a private siding once served a timber mill beyond the fence. At one time, Waverley was a busy station that saw new cars being offloaded for the local motor vehicle dealership. Train 526 gets away from Palmerston North at around 10 past 3 in the wee small hours, arriving at New Plymouth around 9 a.m. The same locomotives returning on train 521 that departs New Plymouth at 5 p.m. Inglewood is one of 4 heritage stations that still remain on the Taranaki line. A scene from 1977 as a twin-set railcar departs the station. Train 534 crossing the Turakina River and entering the 2-kilometre long tunnel. Export logs are loaded at Wainawa, south of Masterton, and travel through to the port of Wellington. Masterton is served by a number of commuter trains 7 days a week saving passengers the drive over the Rimutaka Hill. The steep Johnsonville line was once part of the North Island main trunk out of Wellington that was bypassed with the Tawa Flat deviation in 1937. Today, it's the domain of the commuter trains. Train V1F arriving at Picton with tonnage for the North Island that will travel across Cook Strait on the Inter-Islander. The Transalpine passing the small country station at Cass that was the subject of a 1936 painting by Rita Angus. Inchbonny was a flag station where people would stop an approaching passenger train by waving a red flag that came from an early American practice. With 4 DXC bankers on the front of the 2 DXC locos, train 832 has made the climb through the Steepo Terra tunnel. The Otera DXC bankers are swapped out each Sunday for servicing at Middleton and are seen attached to train 836. The 8 milk wagons on the rear of the Westland Milk Products train were once part of the Taranaki-Fonterra milk trains. The Taramakau Road Rail Bridge was the last in use on the KiwiRail network. A new road bridge was opened alongside it in July 2018. Fairton is a private siding north of Ashburton, where CG class hopper wagons of grain are uplifted and then railed to Martin in the North Island. While the locomotive set back onto the private siding to pick up 2 CG wagons of grain destined for Martin in the North Island. After a number of years, Dunedin Railways will once again run trains from Dunedin through to Pukerangi. KiwiRail still operate over the first 4-kilometre section of the Otago Central Line that serves Fonterra's Bolt store at North Tairi. The Glenbrook Vintage Railway operated WW644's first mainline excursion since the locomotive's delivery trip from the South Island in April 1970. The Waikato Steam Wanderer departed Glenbrook Station on Saturday the 25th of March with 4 full carriages. DBR 1254 had been added as a backup locomotive should any problems arise. So it had been 53 years since 644 had hauled a passenger excursion on the New Zealand rail network. In 1970, 644 was prepared for a test run from Greymouth to Stillwater 9 months after steam had officially finished on the west coast. Operation 644 departed Greymouth on Easter Monday, the 30th of March 1970, the start of its 7-day delivery trip to Auckland, covering 1,290 kilometres. The following scenes were filmed by the late Dawson Wilkinson on his 16mm movie camera. .644 was built at New Zealand Railway's Hillside Workshops in Dunedin in 1915. Ray Matthewson captured the train approaching Owakuni, with the remnants of the Ratahi branch line recently lifted on the right. With more carriages added at Frankton, the train was no less than 290 tonnes in weight. Later that evening, after its arrival in Auckland, 644 ran light engine to Papakura to join 480 in storage in the locomotive shed. Passengers were treated to a photo opportunity at Mercer. The Waikato Steam Wanderer took the east platform at Frankton Station, to the delight of the many onlookers who had gathered. Later in the afternoon, it departed for Glenbrook. Back in 1970, the train departed Hamilton with 4 four-wheeler wagons carrying a supply of coal and water, 8 passenger carriages and a guard's van. The Wangaratta Bank was no challenge to 644. The Glenbrook Vintage Railway operated 3 return trips from Papakura to Glenbrook behind WW 644 on Saturday the 4th of November. Advertised as a family train adventure, it was an opportunity for families to experience the romance of rail behind steam. The 3 shuttles were sold out, with over 600 passengers enjoying the experience. The Glenbrook Vintage Railway joined forces with Steam Incorporated to head a large excursion train to Owakuni. The train in the remote access area between Narakehu and Tarangariri. After an overnight stop at Owakuni, the train departed mid-morning for Glenbrook. Crossing the Hapua Whenua Viaduct, with the old steel viaduct in the background that is now part of the old coach road walking and mountain bike track. Through Piriaka, a small rural settlement south of Tamaranui. And through Taringamotu, that once boasted a large timber mill served by bush tramways that transported logs from the native bush.
Gabriel was purchased by Wilson's New Zealand Portland Cement Company to work their industrial railway until retired in 1984. It was leased to the Bay of Islands Scenic Railway in 1986 until Fletcher's took over the cement works in 1988. Fletcher's gave the railway 2 days to come up with $5,000 to purchase the loco, or it would be cut up for scrap. Fortunately, members were able to raise the funds. The 1927 Pickett's boiler came to an end in 2016 when it failed its boiler certificate. At the time, the estimated cost for a new boiler was approximately $200,000. However, salvation came in 2020 in the form of a grant from the government's Provincial Growth Fund. The fund paid for infrastructure work on the historic Kawakawa to Opua Railway, a new engineering workshop and training building, and a new boiler for Gabriel. The new welded boiler was built by KiwiRail Engineering to exactly the same dimensions as the original 1927 riveted boiler.
A feature of the railway is that it runs down the centre of Kawakawa's main street. The popular Twin Coast Cycleway runs alongside the railway from Kawakawa to Taumarere.
The section from Taumarere Station across the curved long bridge to Opua became a temporary section of the Twin Coast Cycleway that opened in December 2016. Longbridge needed to be repiled, stopping trains from using it, so the cycleway was formed by placing fine gravel over the ballast and rails to form a smooth surface through to Opua.
However, in February 2023, this 3-kilometre section of the formation was reinstated for the railway. During the winter months, May to September, trains run 3 times a day on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, and every day during the school holidays. From October to April, the trains operate 3 times a day, 7 days each week. DAs 1410 and 1431 repositioning Steam Incorporated's excursion train from Paikokariki to Wellington on Saturday the 11th of June 2022. Taking up the rear were JA 1271 and AB 608. 50 years ago in 1972, Steam Incorporated was formed with the intention of operating heritage excursions on the National Rail network. Paikokariki became their base, and they acquired J's 1211 and 1234 and a number of wooden carriages. To celebrate their 50th anniversary, Tommy Seeker organised 2 separate trains departing together from Wellington and both meeting at Woodville. The coastal steam excursion travelled via the Kapiti coast, and the bush rambler excursion via the Wairarapa line. A rare highlight was the 2 excursions departing Wellington and running side by side as far as Kaiwharawhara, where they split onto their relevant lines to eventually meet up at Woodville. In total, the two trains carried close to 500 passengers, with one carriage carrying the founding members of Steam Incorporated. The day was wet, cold and windy. After a watering stop at Paikokoriki, JA 1271 gets its train underway in heavy rain. 608 was in light steam due to KiwiRail crewing availability. Departing Otaki with the near completed expressway that will bypass the bottleneck of Otaki's main street. At Shannon, 1271 was replenished with coal and both locos took water. Approaching Ashurst, the weather had improved. At Woodville, both sets of locomotives ran around the balloon loop to position themselves for their return journeys to Wellington. A drone view of the Woodville station yard that once boasted a two-road locomotive shed, turntable and a dock platform at the station. In the 1960s, 3 passenger trains would pass through Woodville daily. That also employed 140 New Zealand Railway staff who lived in the town with their families. The station served regular passenger services until 2001, when the Bay Express between Wellington and Napier was withdrawn. In October 2016, a group of Woodville residents formed a committee to preserve and restore the station building. DAs 1410 and 1431 headed back down the Wairarapa line. On the other side of the Tararuas, 1271 was making its way to Levin in the late afternoon sun. JA 1271 getting the train underway from Levin. The Bush Rambler excursion arriving at Masterton in torrential rain. The coastal steam excursion departing with a thunderstorm lighting the night sky. We've delved into our archive footage from the late 1980s to reminisce how the New Zealand rail scene looked over 3 decades ago. KA 945 was the first of 35 KA class to be built at the Hutt Railway Workshops in 1939 and sat at Taumaranui for many years, long after steam operations had ceased in the North Island in 1967. Mainline Steam's KA 942 teamed up with Steam Incorporated's J1234 on a trip from New Plymouth to Wanganui in October 1995. In November 1993, J1234 hauled AB608 that was moving from the Ferrymead Railway to Steam Incorporated at Paikokariki for restoration. Also behind 608 in the service wagons is the Craven steam crane, also heading to Paikokariki for preservation by the Rail Heritage Trust. '1234 was returning from the west coast, where it and its passenger carriages had taken part in the Lake Brunner Centennial celebrations. A unique rail opportunity was the running of 2 excursion trains side by side between Mercer and Pukekohe. On the left, the recently restored C847 from the Silverstream Railway in the Hutt Valley, and Glenbrook Vintage Railway's WW480. Two DFs hard at work on the Raurimu spiral with a maximum load for the grade. The line between Greymouth and Hokitika once featured 2 road rail bridges, this one crossing the Arahura River. KB 968 was one of 6 of the class built to work heavy goods trains over the heavily graded Midland line between Springfield and Arthurs Pass. The KBs were fitted with a booster or auxiliary steam engine to the cab bogie that provided extra power and forward motion at low speed, providing additional power on the grades. 2 American Rogers K-class locomotives built in the late 1870s, operating on the Plains Railway south of Ashburton. For the past 30 years, A428 has been the star attraction on the Weka Pass Railway. Built by A&G Price in 1909, it entered service in November of that year and was assigned to Auckland to haul both express passenger and goods trains, including the famous Rotorua Express. 428 transferred to the South Island in 1933. This early footage of sister engine 423 in New Zealand Railway service on the west coast. 423 is the only other A to be saved and is now based at the Glenbrook Vintage Railway. .428 was officially withdrawn from service in July 1969 and placed in Rotten Row at Greymouth. The now defunct New Zealand Railway Preservation Society decided to save the loco and paid a deposit of just over $200 of the $950 asking price. Eventually, a group of Greymouth enginemen raised the balance owing and formed the A428 Preservation Society. In 1981, the Weka Pass Railway approached the society and eventually signed a 5-year lease for the locomotive in 1983. It arrived at Waipara on Saturday the 10th of December 1983 along with DG 770 and 791. After a 10-year overhaul and restoration, 428 returned to steam in September 1993. Saturday the 29th of July 2023 saw the Weka Pass Railway run a special country branch mixed train for rail fans. Plenty of photo run-bys were staged on a clear winter's day. "28 years earlier, in September 1995, New Zealand rail fan features editor the late Reid McNaught framing his twin cameras on the action. At the time, this was believed to be the first steam-hauled goods train in the modern era, privately chartered for photographic and video purposes by New Zealand RAILSCENE and New Zealand Rail Fan. A428 made its final run on Sunday the 30th of July before it was taken out of service for its 10-year survey and a major overhaul. The morning service was run for the public, while the afternoon service was a special members and friends train. Paul Markham eases 428 into the shed to wait its return to service sometime in the future. New Zealand's oldest operating steam locomotive F13 celebrated 150 years in October since entering service in December 1873. During Labour weekend, Saturday the 21st of October was set aside for the rail fans, featuring goods, mixed and Victorian-era passenger trains. Today's railway network was conceived in 1870, when the colonial treasurer, Julius Vogel, came up with a grand vision to borrow £10 million on the British market to create a network of light, narrow-gauge lines that would open up the nation following the passing of the 1870 Railways Act. Vogel got his loan and set about building a 3-foot 6-inch gauge nationwide railway as New Zealand entered the Great Public Works era. Small locomotives were contemplated, with an average speed of 15 miles per hour or 24 kilometres per hour being considered adequate. Preliminary designs for the F were prepared in 1871 by two public works engineers, John Blackett and William Blair. A total of 88 F-class were constructed and supplied by 7 British locomotive builders between 1872 and 1888. These illustrious little saddle tank locomotives worked on virtually all parts of the railway system. F13 was one of 2 prototype engines and entered service on the 20th of December 1873 to assist with the construction of the Dunedin and Clutha Railway. In 1879 it was assigned to the Public Works Department and in 1885 transferred to New Zealand Railways. It achieved a record 92 years of active service with New Zealand Railways, finishing its days steam heating the express passenger carriages waiting on the weight-restricted wharves at Lyttelton for the arrival of the overnight Union Steamship inter-island ferries from Wellington. It was withdrawn from service in October 1964 and stored undercover at Arthur's Pass for a number of years before arriving at Ferrymead Historic Park. Work commenced in 1982 to restore F13 to working order. In September 1999, F13 teamed up with F163 on the Weka Pass Railway, a highlight of the 3rd Waipara Vintage Festival. This was a historic occasion, as the last time these two teamed up was back in October 1963, when they ran an excursion from Christchurch to Lyttelton. Also operating during the celebration was D140 from the Canterbury Railway Society and D16 from the Pleasant Point Museum and Railway.